mistake? Why did aid restart only a few days later?
Again, we would take complete issue with what would some call reporting and others call a hatchet job.
So why did aid start just a couple days later?
I'm saying the reporting is inaccurate, ma'am.
Okay, before we show evidence and continue with more live footage, just imagine this. You're a Ukrainian soldier, pinned down under Russian fire, waiting for American aid that never comes. Not because of sabotage, not because of war, but because one man in Washington got confused. Pete Hegseth's blunder didn't just cost time, it cost lives. And when Congress found out, Representative Mikie Sherrill took him apart live and without mercy.
Being here today, Mr. Secretary, your testimony over the last several days before Congress, I've heard you speak about all of your supposed accomplishments from your time at the Pentagon. I have to say, your training at Fox News has let you spend months of dangerous dysfunction and incompetence into catchy phrases like restoring the warrior ethos and increasing lethality. But the truth is, it's really been chaos at the Pentagon under your leadership. You've clearly shown you're unable to manage the Department of Defense, but what I'm most concerned about are three specific areas: your operational incompetence, your managerial incompetence, and your budgetary incompetence. So let's start with operational. According to news reports, in your first week on the job, you got confused in a National Security Council meeting and thought President Trump wanted you to stop all aid to Ukraine. In a well-functioning administration, you would have asked for clarification before making that seismic policy shift, but instead you ordered vital military aid heading to the front lines turned around, costing the U.S. millions of dollars and depriving Ukrainian soldiers of equipment they needed to fight Russia. So, Mr. Secretary, can you explain how exactly you misunderstood such a monumental presidential order?
One of many fake news headlines we've dealt with.
So President Trump told you to halt military aid to Ukraine on January 30th?
As is often the case, highly ideological and very ill-informed reporters love to speculate about things they know nothing about in order to spear President Trump and myself.
So it sounds like actually the reporting is correct, because I will say, if it wasn't a mistake, why did aid restart only a few days later?
Again, we would take complete issue with what would some call reporting and others call a hatchet job.
So why did aid start just a couple days later?
I'm saying the reporting is inaccurate, ma'am.
I don't think that's correct. So let's move on to your managerial incompetence. I think we can see why you misunderstood the president, because you're obviously misunderstanding my questions. Less than a month into the job, you fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, CQ Brown, and the chief of naval operations, Lisa Franchetti, without cause. And to this day, you still have not provided an adequate explanation for removing them. As far as I can tell, you fired CQ Brown because he was black and Lisa Franchetti because she is a woman. So nearly 4 months later, we still don't have a new nominee for Chief of Naval Operations. News reports, and you can contest it, but I'd love to hear your answer, say that you haven't nominated someone because qualified admirals keep turning the position down. So tell me, Mr. Secretary, when will Congress receive your nomination for the next chairman of the next Chief of Naval Operations?
Ma'am, with all due respect, I would suggest not believing every headline you read.
With all due respect, I'd like your nomination. When will we see it?
There is not a single admiral or any military official has turned down a position that's been.
So when will we see your nominee for the Chief of Naval Operations?
In due time, for all the right reasons.
Again, I think we've seen the managerial incompetence. Okay, let's move on to budgetary incompetence. You missed the deadline to submit a draft defense budget to Congress, which makes it impossible for us to complete our work on the NDAA or appropriations, and makes it more likely you'll receive delays in funding you need for new acquisitions, programs, and other priorities. Additionally, you're blowing money on poorly conceived operations and vanity projects for President Trump, retrofitting the Qatari jet to serve as Air Force One, will cost about $400 million. The parade in D.C. this weekend will cost upwards of $40 million. Your bombing campaign in Yemen cost about $1 billion, and a week later they were having missile strikes in Israel. Your operations in L.A. will cost tens of millions of dollars, and you claim to be cutting costs at the Pentagon, but all I see are wasted dollars better spent addressing our most pressing threats like China. So, Mr. Secretary, what priorities have you cut funding for to pay for these projects?
Ma'am, I would just say your list left off securing the southern border.
So, Mr. Secretary, what priorities have you cut funding for to pay for these projects?
We make trade-offs every day, and I would imagine what we want to spend on is quite different than what the previous administration did.
Well, I think the American
those changes quickly, and they're reflected in this budget, and we're very proud of them.
I think the American people can see why I'm so concerned about this incompetence. Thank you, and I yield back.
This wasn't a hearing, it was a public demolition. And if you think it peaked early, think again, because what comes next only gets more explosive. Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill didn't just criticize Pete Hegseth, she dismantled him. Her accusations weren't vague. They weren't couched in diplomatic phrasing. They were clear-cutting and impossible to ignore. She described the Pentagon not as disorganized or under pressure, but as a chaotic failure on every level operationally, managerially, and financially. And she held one man responsible. Your training at Fox News, she said, might help you come up with catchy slogans, but it hasn't helped you run the Pentagon. In her words, Hegseth turned dysfunction into sound bites. Behind phrases like restoring the warrior ethos and lethality was a trail of mismanagement, confusion, and billions wasted. And then came the first bombshell. She accused Hegseth of a catastrophic misstep in his very first week on the job, a mistake so serious it may have cost lives. According to reports, he misunderstood a presidential comment, thinking Trump wanted to cancel all military aid to Ukraine. Without seeking clarification, he ordered vital shipments turned around. No review, no confirmation, just chaos. The results? Millions of dollars lost, and worse, frontline Ukrainian soldiers left without the tools they desperately needed to defend themselves against Russian aggression. And when pressed on it, Hegseth deflected. Fake news, he said. Ideologically motivated reporters. But the damage was already done, because if it wasn't a mistake, why did the aid resume just days later? That was only the beginning. Sherrill then zeroed in on his internal leadership or lack thereof. Within weeks of assuming office, Hegseth abruptly fired two of the most senior military leaders in the country. C.Q. Brown, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Lisa Franchetti, the chief of naval operations. To this day, no explanation has been given. But Sherrill made her position devastatingly clear. Brown was fired because he was black, Franchetti because she was a woman. Her words sent shock waves through the room. This wasn't speculation. It was an accusation of identity-based purging at the highest level of military leadership. And then came the silence. Hegseth didn't defend the firings. He didn't deny them. He simply stalled, nearly 4 months later. There's still no replacement for Franchetti because, according to reports, qualified candidates keep turning the job down, and Congress has no answers. So she asked him again directly, publicly, "When will we get your nominee for the Chief of Naval Operations?" His response, "In due time." But Sherrill wasn't finished. She pivoted to the numbers, and the picture she painted was damning. Hegseth had missed the deadline to submit the defense budget, a failure that cripples Congress's ability to fund critical programs. Meanwhile, millions were being wasted on what she called vanity projects for Trump. Retrofitting a private jet in Qatar to become a makeshift Air Force One cost $400 million. A DC military parade $40 million. A week-long bombing campaign in Yemen $1 billion, with zero strategic gain. And what about America's top threats? China, cybersecurity, emerging global conflict zones. All underfunded, all overlooked. She closed her attack with one final brutal question. What priorities have you cut to pay for these projects? His answer, we make trade-offs every day. This was more than a grilling. It was a warning shot. And in the next segment, we've got the live footage that backs every word. Because this wasn't just one woman holding power to account. It was a rare moment where the mask came off and the world saw just how deep the dysfunction runs.